There we go. Can you guys hear me now? Hopefully you can. Sorry for the shaking video. And if somebody wouldn't mind just confirming to make sure that the audio is going through, that would be awesome. Excellent, excellent. Thanks, Jen. Okay, so I apologize about that. I am a solo artist show, so I'm dealing with filming, audio, painting at the same time. So I'm going to just quickly talk about the traceable again for those of you that missed it. So again, we have our traceable. You can pause the video. Let me rephrase that. I got a little flustered. We have our design on the canvas, so you can pause the video, draw what you see, or in the description box below, you can purchase a traceable, download it, print it out, and then with carbon paper, you transfer it to your surface. And that's how you get your initial image on your canvas. So again, sorry for the extra long explanation. Okay, so to jump right in, and this channel is geared towards first-time and beginner painters. So I'm going to kind of explain what it feels like, the mixing of the paint, and I am using a large flat brush as we do the background today, and I'm going to be using a light blue color. And you are more than welcome to change out the colors. So I just saw the comment. Denise, nice. My cats are actually singing in the front room, so they were trying to do the audio for you guys too. But they definitely keep me on my toes. All right, so for our background color, we're going to start with white, pull a little bit of that aside, and it's easiest to start with your light color and then work darker. So I'm going to grab a little bit of pigment, and that was actually quite a bit, and you mix it with your white, and you notice that it's actually kind of a medium blue. So if you add more white, then it kind of becomes a little lighter blue. But if you're not sure and you want to maybe see if you want it darker or lighter, you can do a little bit darker on the edge and then decide if you want the lighter or the darker shade. And for the painting, it doesn't really matter which shade you go for, but we are just going with a light blue. And as you go to apply your paint, try a few different brush strokes just to kind of increase your comfort level. So try using the full width of the brush, then you can turn it sideways, trying to use just the skinny portion or smaller brush stroke. And then everybody's favorite is literally just slapping that brush on there. So whichever one that you feel like you want to try today, go for it. And we are going to fill up this entire background from the edges of the lines to the edges of the canvas. And as you can see, as I keep grabbing more paint, I kind of keep mixing the color each time. So if you're doing that at home, don't stress about getting the exact same shade every time. If you have a little variety in your background, it just adds more intrigue and makes your composition look a little better, I think, in my opinion. But basically, if you're a beginner painter, don't stress out. I want you to just have fun. This is a nice kind of just escape from everything else in your world. You'll zone in to kind of transforming this white surface. And it is very satisfying to start with a white surface and then over the course of, however long it takes you to paint, to transform that white surface. And to kind of go back and remember how blank the surface started out and what you've done to it, there's a certain amount of satisfaction, mental satisfaction that happens. And that's generally what encourages you to go, hey, I want to do this again. So again, I'm just trying to encourage you to get lost in the process of painting and find a regular outlet for yourself. More for your mental stability and relaxation therapy than anything else. Now, as I get closer to the bird, I'm prone to just kind of stick with the same brush, but feel free to jump down to a smaller brush to get into little nooks and crannies around the pelican if needed. But as you can see here, if you overlap your bird a little bit, don't stress out. We will put some darker colors for the bird on top of that. All right, I am going to switch brushes in just a moment. There we go. So your call if you want to use the pointy brush or another just kind of small flat brush. And then I'm going to talk about some wet on wet blending. And for my beginner painters, that's a really fun way to get comfortable with paint and get kind of comfortable with mixing colors. And we'll be doing it directly on the background. All right, and again, we've got some variety. Okay, so let's see. Awesome, awesome. Let's do a shout out to everybody that is jumped on, and quite a few of you, so I've got to scroll up through the conversation. All right, so Miss Smith, thanks for joining us. Denise, JR team, thanks. Let's see who else. Natasha, thank you. All right. And shout out to everybody else that is watching, but you don't comment. Totally okay. I'm just thrilled that you guys are painting and hanging out with me for a little bit. Okay, so to do wet on wet blending, you can see I've got the smaller brush and I'm grabbing some of that white. And compared to what I do for some of the other demos, I actually want the bottom to be a little bit lighter and the top to be a little bit darker. So taking that white, you literally just kind of slap it on there. Really fun. And you're going to notice we're going to do the darker up top, but the lighter colors will diffuse a lot quicker in your base compared to when we put the darker colors on there. So once you've kind of slapped that color on there, I usually wipe off excess paint, and then you just go back to where you slapped that color on there and you move your brush back and forth. And this can only be done while your background paint is wet and the new paint that you put on top of it is wet. So this is called a wet on wet blending method. And again, I'm actually just going to overlap those feet a little bit just so I can kind of keep the brush strokes nice and long as I go across the full width of the canvas. And if you do what I did to where you end up moving your brush quite a bit and you lose that effect, all you do is just reapply and then maybe move your brush a little less. Because like I said, I did want the bottom to be a lot lighter compared to the top. And this wet on wet blending, this is one of the most favorite things to do as a beginner and first time painter. So don't be afraid to apply your paint a little thicker and just kind of have fun. And if you feel like finger painting, go right ahead. There is nothing wrong with that. Get a little bit more of that lightness over here. And with acrylic paint, it generally dries in about 15 to 20 minutes. So this will dry, and then when I put the paint on top of it, it's like I never went over it with the other color. So that is one of the nice things about acrylic paint. Now, with that being said, you can use any materials that you want, crayons, markers, colored pencils, pastels, and follow along the videos and just use the video as a guideline. It just makes for a lot of fun, and just, you know, you use what you have. Don't feel like you have to buy brand new supplies. So as I was explaining that, I just kind of went right into just grabbing that dark blue, and just like we did with the white, slap that on the top, and then if you have any excess paint, just wipe that off. And then here we're going to do the same thing. Just move your brush back and forth, and you'll see how it kind of diffuses the darker blue with that background color. And like I said, just kind of play, have fun. Play with the pressure of your brush. More pressure, your brush strokes will show up a little bit more. Less pressure, they'll be a little bit softer. And I'm actually going back to make some of that light blue again, just because I didn't have enough paint right there. So in the world of painting, adjust to what you need and the variables that you're working with when you paint. There is nothing supposed to be perfect about painting. It is more about the process, especially when you are in your beginning stages of painting. I want just a little bit darker in that corner. All right, and the places that you want it darker, you know, you would just move your brush less. And then if you had the white, same thing, you would just move your brush less where you want more of that new color you introduce to be a little bolder. All right. Awesome, and hi Victoria and Rhonda. Thank you guys for jumping on. All right, so we're gonna move into the Pelican. And we're gonna start with our light colors, and I will primarily be using the pointy brushes because we are pretty tight and controlled in this design. So I'm gonna start off with the bigger of the two pointy brushes. If you only have one, just use whichever you have. And we're actually gonna start with a yellow and white mixture. We're gonna start on the face, and then when we get into the body, it's gonna be a bit more gray with a little bit of raw sienna on the belly. All right, so I like to grab some of that white, push it to a side away from the blue because we don't necessarily want to create green today. And let's see, let's do probably a 2 parts white to 1 part yellow. So we're going for a bit more white than yellow and going for kind of that lemony yellow color. We will use that direct yellow in just a moment. So we're going to apply this to the head of our pelican. And as I go over those black Sharpie lines, I'm just applying, making sure that paint's a little bit thicker on there to kind of compensate for the dark line underneath. Now, depending on what type of paint that you are using, you may have to do 1 or 2 layers of your paint to get an opaque coverage or apply it a little bit thicker. Like I said, you always have variables that you'll be adjusting and working with in the painting process. Now here, because I have some of that blue that overlapped, but my light yellow is actually going to go on that, same thing. I might have to do 2 layers or just put it on kind of thick. And when I go to apply it kind of thick, if I come in at this kind of 45 or almost probably 160 degree, almost flat, and use the side of the brush, that allows you to kind of apply the paint a little bit thicker compared to using the ends of the bristles, and it pushes it closer to the canvas. And that will become more comfortable with the more that you paint. It might have been a little confusing with that explanation. So let's see, we've got the whole head here, and then we've got a little tip on the end of the beak. We might reapply that at the end. And now we're going to go with some of that direct yellow. And I've got quite a bit of buildup on my brush, so I'm just going to wipe some of that off and now go with the direct yellow. And as we work in some of these tiny spaces today, I'm going to just be making little dots, and you can overlap your dots to create a larger space. And if you end up enjoying making these little dots, I would recommend that you check out pointillism. Pointillism is a very fun and rather simple application for the painting process. And literally you're just making dots. You can overlap the dots, the different colors you put together. And again, it's very meditative just doing the dots, the stippling that we've done some blending stippling before in some of the other demos. All right, so again, we had a little bit of the yellow here. We went underneath the beak and then kind of around the curve of the head, not as so much of his little pointy little mohawk back here, but the curve of his head came around with that direct yellow. So I'm going to leave the yellow that's on my brush, and we're going to add a little touch of orange to this yellow and white mixture that we used. And kind of going more for that pastel-y orange color. And we're going to go on the beak. And it may look one way here, like as I apply it here, it's not as orange as I want it to be. So if you make a color on your plate and then you apply it to your canvas and you realize you need to adjust, totally okay to adjust your color. So I'm just going to add more orange to go a little bit darker. There we go. And we're going to go about halfway up the beak. We've got more grayscale for the rest of this. And actually, let's just pull it into here. I want a little more orange hanging out. And if you're finding that as you're painting, your instincts are pushing you to add more color where maybe I'm not telling you to, or it's not generally, you don't see it on the photograph that you're referencing, trust that. Your instincts will push you in the direction you need to go. Okay, so we're going to let that dry a little bit, and we're going to work on our kind of shades of gray. And we're going to work opposite. I'm actually going to start with black first to get some of these bold lines in, and then we'll go with kind of a dark gray, a light gray, and then we'll put a little bit of raw sienna on the belly. All right. And if you guys do have any questions as we go along, I do kind of get carried away and forget to look at the chat sometimes, but leave your comment and I will address it while I'm painting. All right, so still that pointy brush, we're using black paint, and as we apply it here, for you at home, I want you to just observe the place that you see me put this color and the general shape that I make with this placement, with this color. And all I want you to do at home is, to the best of your ability, mimic what you see. And by mimicking what you see, you are strengthening your power of observation. And that is actually an awesome life skill that will show up in other aspects of your life, but it is a very important art skill. The more that you can observe the little nuances and details as you look and observe things, the better your painting will get. So arts is, like I said earlier, not about being perfect, but just kind of improving your skills one day at a time or one painting at a time. All right, so as we work with this and we're in the small pointy brush, I want you to play with the pressure of your brush. If you treat it kind of like a pencil, you can kind of make a skinnier line. And if you have a little bit more pressure, it's going to be a bit of a wider line. And in the beginning stages of painting, that can be kind of frustrating. So be kind to yourself because you're working your muscles, you're working your brain, and the next time that you go to paint, some of the stuff that you're doing right now for this painting will make even more sense. So that's why I recommend that you possibly even paint the same painting multiple times. And when you paint it multiple times, it's one of the few times that you get to see your own evolution, your own learning of the new skills. Okay, we'll do a little bit more on the face later on. So we're going to move into our dark gray. So I'm just going to leave that pile right there. And we're going to grab a chunk of white. And I still like to kind of push it on the side, leave what's on the brush. And like I said, we're just going for the dark gray. And yours may be a little bit lighter or darker than mine. That's okay. All right, and again, we're going to be hanging out next to the areas we were just working on and possibly slightly overlapping a little bit, especially as we get into these little tips of the feathers here. So again, playing with that pressure of your brush, pull it in. And if you need to, as you're working with the pressure of your brush, put your pinky out, put that on a dry spot on your canvas, and you can use that as your pivot point. Or what I'm doing here while I'm filming, my forearm is actually resting on the edge of the table. But do what you need to do to kind of steady your arm. And even if you need to turn the canvas upside down because it's easier for you to make a brush stroke in that direction, feel free to rotate your canvas as needed. So I basically filled in the rest of these little feather, little fingers for the wing tips. And we're going to do the same thing on this side. And you will notice that some of that gray and black will mix a little bit together. That's okay. And even as I made my next mixture, I didn't intentionally do it, but it did go a little bit lighter. And if that happens to be the case on yours, that's okay. All right, so basically just filling in the rest of those little tips of the feathers. And we're going to get his back. And again, I am going right over those black lines or the traceable lines, depending on what you have on your canvas. All right, a little underneath the tail. All right, and we will come in with a few highlights at the end with white and define those feathers a little bit more. And let's see, now we're going to move down to a lighter gray as we move into the rest of the wings, and then a little bit lighter with raw sienna as we move into the belly and the feet. All right. Natasha, thanks for the suggestion. Fluffy clouds. I think those are actually my nemesis. I don't feel like I'm the best at creating those. I have one tutorial on the demo already, but I have another one in the editing phase, and it's got a couple palm fronds and then some fluffy clouds in the back. And I'm hoping to release that hopefully the end of this month. I think I just have to do the intro speech for it. And I do have another one on the list. So it is good for me to challenge myself and do the stuff that I'm not good at. And doing these daily demos and the suggestions that you guys have been giving me, you have certainly challenged me more than I've probably let on. So I take the challenge and I will make more fluffy cloud videos. Okay, so we're going even lighter gray. So just basically add more white to the edge of the gray you were just using. And I want you to step down about 2 shades. And again, it may look one way on the plate compared to when we put it on here. And as I apply it to the canvas, I actually want to go a little bit lighter. So again, like I said, don't be afraid to adjust even after you've started to apply your paint on the canvas. So again, filling in the rest of this wing, we're going to get the edge. I will probably get a little bit of that black in there. That's okay. Oh yeah, and I totally forgot to tell everybody. I was just now holding my breath as I was doing that, so please make sure that you breathe while you're painting. If you are noticing that your hand is shaky as you go to apply the paint, that means you're holding your breath. So if you exhale as you touch your brush to the canvas, that will help your process. All right. And usually because I'm talking that, make sure that I breathe, but I did hold my breath there a moment ago. Okay, so let's get a little on the feet before we move to that next color. So again, I'm going right over that blue that we overlapped on the background. It is fully dry. I actually just have this spot here and here in the corner that are still wet. Everything else is dry now. All right. Okay, so now we're going to go, I'm going to leave that, kind of twirl the remaining paint off and leave what's on my brush. We're going to go for a rather light gray, and then I'm going to add a touch of the raw sienna to it. So it kind of makes it a dirty gray. If that works. And if yours has a bit more brown than mine or a little more gray, that's okay. And again, I'm going to add more tan, more raw sienna. There we go. So I'm going to fill in the rest of the belly, and then we'll go back up to finish the details on the head and face of the pelican. And then we'll come back and add a few more highlights. And that should get us to the conclusion of this little demo. And on a side note, I do try to keep these demos kind of quick, given some of my own technical challenges that I'm dealing with and doing this solo and my internet connection. So do not feel like you have to keep up and paint everything that I paint in a half hour. If this takes you 2 hours, if it takes you 3 hours, if it takes you a couple of days, that is completely okay. Like I said, the demos are here more just to kind of help inspire you and give you a base of what this should look like. And no matter what you paint, please email me photos of your creations. And that can be at paintwithlovejoy@gmail.com. So we're going to move back into the face, and I'm actually going to start with black again. We're going to define kind of this little cheek here. So again, put that pinky out to kind of steady your hand or rest your forearm against the edge of the table. Excuse me. Because we are going for kind of small spaces here. And here's where you'll see me kind of do almost the kind of pointillism, even though they're almost like little dash marks, to fill up the space. And again, remember to breathe, exhale as you touch the canvas. And if you can, this is going to be kind of tough, but if you can redo that eyeliner, if it is way too much with the brush, I completely understand. Switch over to use a toothpick or a paper clip to make some of those tiny, tiny little lines. And I'm going to kind of carry this line, go right over that traceable line for the splitting of the beak, the opening. All right, and now we're going to go, because I still actually have, let's use the medium gray and then we use the light gray. Because I still have these colors mixed, I can grab that. If you need to remix it, just remix your color. So we're going for kind of that medium gray. And again, hanging out to where we just placed that black, pulling it down kind of the bottom bill, leaving a little bit of space, and then kind of coming towards the end of the beak on the bottom. Now this last little spot up here is very, very light. So I'm going to go ahead and clean my brush out, and I'm going to grab even lighter gray paint. So with that clean brush, I'm going to grab a little dollop of white, and then I'm just going to grab a little touch of this because I do want it pretty light. There we go. I'm going to fill in the rest of this space. And I am going to overlap the orange just a touch. I'm going to leave a little bit of that. So again, keep this light pressure. Remember to breathe. And we're on the top part of the beak, right above that line. So it's kind of given a little highlight, a slight separation between the dark line on the bottom part of the beak and this lighter line on the top part of the beak. All right. Okay, so as I was looking at the picture, then looking to see if we had any questions. Denise, love that you are drawing the picture. Take your time. Don't feel like you have to rush. And I, again, just love that everybody is getting creative and pushing their own boundaries and their own, bringing their own challenges to themselves. Okay, so as we go back into the bird, 'cause I'm allowing that black to dry a little bit before we put the little eyeball in there. We're going to go back to the body and put some details on. So I'm going to stick with that light gray that we were just using. I'm going to make a little bit more of it. And if it's a little bit darker than what you just used, that's okay. And again, we're going to kind of play with that light pressure of the brush and putting on some of these highlights. So on the back, again, just making these little dash marks. And I'm going to have to apply it just a little bit thicker so it shows up. There we go. So light pressure, just making little dash marks, and you have to imagine that the feathers on the pelican, because they dive into the ocean, they have a unique oil on them so they don't get wet and they can fly off of the water, take off of the water. So a lot of times, because of the consistency of their feathers and the oil in there, we have these just great contrasting lines. I was trying to think of the right word for that. So when you have some of those contrasting feather lines to where I guess you can kind of see the underneath. I need to make more of this. Oops, and got a little blue in there. So if you happen to do that to where it gets contaminated, just clean your brush and then grab from a fresh source for the next round. Or even make a new pile of your white paint, whatever you feel like doing. All right, so again, just making these dash marks. We're going to do it with black a little bit later and some dark gray, but it just kind of helps create the depth for the multiple layers of feathers that these birds have. Really, any bird has. So again, as you are painting this, you are strengthening your power of observation, looking at the screen, seeing where I apply something, and then to the best of your ability, mimicking that on your canvas. All right, and then back here we have a little bit, that same color we've been using, there's a little nice distinction, and it's kind of the front of the feathers. So the right side of the feathers, almost each individual feather. Let's make this one a little longer. And then they get a little smaller as it gets towards the back. But that just kind of helps pop that part of the feather forward and push where the black part is, it pushes it back. All right, so same thing here. And this side, they're going to be on the left-hand side. Again, it just kind of helps give us that depth and break up the space to show that we've got these layers happening on the bird. Oh, and the tail, I almost forgot. Top of the tail. And then a little bit on that foot. Okay, so we're going to clean that brush. Let's go to that dark gray, not quite black. And this is going to help a few of the areas that we were just doing those dash marks. It'll help kind of, it gives more contrast by putting this dark color next to some of those lighter colors. And I am pulling it into kind of the body here. It stands out a little bit better on that light raw sienna white mixture. And if you're finding that your brush strokes just keep getting whiter and whiter, take a look at your brush. Do you have a lot of buildup on your brush, a lot of paint hanging out? If you do, that buildup of the paint is what kind of pulls the bristles apart further and further. So just clean your brush really good and then grab fresh paint. All right. Okay, and that's looking pretty dry. I am going to put some more white on here. We're going to accentuate his little mohawk. first, let's do a little bit of the black. Just going to kind of get a little definition in between the back of the bird and the wing. So just kind of giving a little bit of a defining line. And if you feel like you want to do the pop art style of outlining everything, basically re-outlining the traceable, go right ahead and do that. I will probably not do that for today's painting. And I'm just taking the black a few places that I didn't get covered on the first round. I'm just filling in the black open canvas spaces with that. Okay, and while I have just a touch of that black on here, let's go a little bit on the back right behind that head with smaller little dash marks. Okay, and let's go ahead on that foot, and that would be the top left-hand side of the foot. Okay, so let's get a little of a yellow eye in there. So at home, if your black that you did that eyeliner earlier is not dry, wait until this is dry before you add the yellow, because you really don't want your black and yellow mixing. It just kind of becomes really dirty. So I'm basically just filling that in. We'll put a catch light in there in just a moment, and you can even put a black pupil in. We'll do that right now. And again, at home, wait for that to dry before you put your black pupil in. And all I'm going to do is kind of hold my brush perpendicular to the canvas, touch it, and pull it right back. And it'll be in the center, the middle of the yellow circle you just applied. And I do have to apply mine a little bit thicker, just to compensate for all that wet paint. All right, so clean your brush really good. We're going to take that pure white paint, and just about every 2 or 3 brush strokes, you're going to grab more paint, and then we're going to kind of accentuate, make those dash marks again. And I do want it overlapping the background a little bit. We're not going to overlap his back too much, just because that is still wet paint, and he really just has these little wispies for his little mohawk there. And then we'll put a few other pure white highlights on. All right, so again, we're just making these little dash marks for his mohawk. And I'm actually just applying it pretty thick so it compensates, and it's a little easier for you guys to see it on the video. And then right here, kind of that curve of his head, and then going underneath the beak, we're adding that white. And I am kind of holding the brush sideways, but still just kind of keeping with the little dash marks for the application. And then as we move on the top of the beak, we're actually just going to make kind of a line going straight down the top of the beak, even just right over that original marker or traceable line. And again, student grade paint is on the transparent side, so don't be afraid to apply it a little thicker. I did film an intermediate video yesterday using my new golden paints, and it was very nice to work with that paint again. So as you find that you get more and more into the creative process, wait until you're really into it before you purchase nicer paints, you know, because they can get kind of expensive, but they do make a difference. And maybe just kind of purchase it at one color at a time, just so you can get a feel for it and decide which one you like. Professional, I actually use both student grade and professional grade paint in my artwork. I actually like some of the transparent qualities of the student grade paint. All right. So as I look at it on the computer screen, it's the same thing as looking at it from 20 feet away. So as you get into the groove of painting, I want you to get out of your chair, step away 5 to 10 feet away, and start looking at your painting from that distance. That is the normal viewing distance for artwork and pretty much most things in life. So learning to look at your artwork from that perspective will help your evolution that much more. When you take your progress photo with your cell phone, or if you look at it on the computer, the way our digital media or digital devices work, when we look at it on the phone, it's the same thing as looking at your painting from 20 feet away without getting out of your chair. So another tool to just kind of bring into your creative process. All right, so we're going to do the catch light in just a minute, but let me see if we have any questions. I forgot to look over the last couple of minutes. We got the fluffy clouds we'll be adding. And we got the drawing comment. Everybody, yep, everybody take your time doing the drawing. I love it. It's not my fastest thing either. And again, it's not about being fast or completing this super quickly, but just allowing yourself time to get creative, time away from your everyday stresses. Okay, so hopefully this will work. Let's see, this is going to be a super tiny little dot, and it's going to kind of just go right on top of that little black pupil that we added. So again, at home, please wait for all this to dry. It will be much easier. Don't hold your breath. There we go. I can't quite tell if it came through on the video. We might have to kind of zoom into that. But literally, it's just a tiny little white dot next to that black pupil. Take that away. There we go. All right. And just maybe a few other, breaking up that space a little bit. But I think we might have to name this little pelican. He probably lives at one of the piers close to my house. But yeah, they're such cool animals, cool birds. Okay, so this isn't too bad. Let's go a little more orange. I want a little more pop of color. If you are inclined to add anything that I didn't do, go right ahead and do it. Really grateful that you guys show up on the weekend and hang out with me, and anybody that does catch this on the replay, just grateful that you guys are painting. That is, I think one of my business goals is just to get more and more people creative and painting. So I think this kind of brings us to the conclusion of today's painting. Tomorrow will be a sunset cheetah silhouette, so there will be no traceable for that. I like to have both, so that way you don't have to stress out about drawing or purchase a traceable. But we will do a little bit of drawing when we draw the cheetah tomorrow, and I'll break that down step by step. So I do have a long list of things that I'm creating, but please feel free to let me know more of what you want created for these videos, and I'll keep making them. Let me know how you're doing. Send me your pictures. Share with your community the creative process. And I am almost done to release the educators bundle. So if you have any teachers, child care providers, senior care facility, educators, homeschools, they are more than welcome to utilize my videos in their classroom. And then the educator bundle on my Paint with Lovejoy website gives you access to the traceables, a master list, the color mixing library, and other stuff that I'll be adding to as the years go by. Part of the reason I created the channel was a response to so much art being cut out of the schools, and I wanted to just give an alternative source for first-time painters to paint at home. All right, so looks like we're doing good. Hope everybody has a great day, and I will see you tomorrow. Cheers.